We are ThermoSilk, an undergraduate team of biologists and engineers from UC Berkeley. We believe that applications of hornet silk can improve the lives of millions of people. We designed a flexible, biodegradable, thermoelectric textile that draws its inspiration directly from hornet nests. We believe that incorporation of this novel textile into the structure of emergency shelters can dramatically improve their quality and safety for inhabitants. There are more than 70 million forcibly displaced people across the planet, of whom nearly 26 million are refugees. The COVID-19 global pandemic and the mounting consequences of climate change have made it undeniably clear that every nation and its inhabitants are vulnerable to displacement.
And there is another field hospital going up, this one in Central Park. Not a moment too soon. We just learned there are 14 more reported deaths in New York City.
This is one of the greatest challenges of our generation, yet current emergency shelters are anything but optimal.
We designed ThermoSilk as a solution to two of these critical problems. We focus on the issue of connection to a dependable power source and a way to keep the temperature of a shelter stable in extreme heat. Access to electricity is critical in forming a livelihood in a modern world, yet 7 million refugees struggle with access to this basic resource.
Lack of access to electricity is linked to detrimental impacts to health, education, and economic livelihoods.
Access to electricity is linked to improved quality of life and lower mortality rates. Electrification has been shown to be directly proportional to increases in literacy, increases in study time for students, and improvements in gender equality. Households that were electrified saved 4% of their monthly expenditure by reducing their energy costs. Yet emergency shelter housing too often fails to provide electricity for its occupants. Emergency living situations also fail to protect their inhabitants from unlivable weather. Standard UNHCR tents are rated to be safe up to 40 degrees Celsius, but average summer temperatures are well above that in many Middle Eastern and North African countries. It is in these dangerously warm areas that the majority of refugees live. A recent case study conducted within the Azraq refugee camp in Jordan reported that the internal climate of shelters regularly rose to temperatures deemed life-threatening for inhabitants. These conditions were observed for more than 20% of the year. Put another way, for a fifth of the year, many refugees' only shelter from scorching temperatures was deemed uninhabitable. Over half of the world's refugees are children, a population at especially high risk of heat-related illness.
Homelessness is also a rising issue and is prevalent in many major cities, including our base, Berkeley, California. Recently, homelessness has increased in response to high rates of unemployment and other conditions induced by the COVID-19 pandemic. Homeless populations and globally displaced refugees share many of the same hardships in regard to their living conditions. Roughly 1/3 of homeless mortalities in the Phoenix area are due to heat-related illness, a number that has increased dramatically in recent years. As climate change continues to place more and more people from every country at the mercy of worsening weather patterns, a solution becomes more important than ever.
Humans are not the only species to build shelters to protect from harsh climates. Social insects have lived in inhospitable environments for millions of years, yet their bodies lack many of the complex homeostasis mechanisms that humans possess. Researchers report that hornets have an especially creative way of managing this. Inside their nests, hornets weave silk structures that store heat as electricity on hot afternoons, only to release this energy again as heat in the chilly night. This silk enables hornet nests to maintain steady conditions while the temperature outside fluctuates wildly, even at higher temperatures. Notice how steady the temperature in the nest remains. At ThermoSilk, we are incredibly excited by this research and see an opportunity to apply the Hornet's method of thermoelectrical regulations to human shelters. We believe that we can use the properties of hornet silk to convert excess heat to electricity during the day to use as a steady source of power. we could produce biodegradable hornet silk linings for compatible emergency shelters that will generate electricity from ambient heat. By converting heat to electricity, ThermoSilk linings will also stabilize the temperature inside the emergency structures in which they are deployed. This means our silk can act as both a generator and temperature regulator. According to our research, on a hot day, one of our linings could produce at least 9.66 kiloamp hours of electricity. That's roughly 10 times the discharge of a conventional car battery. If redirected, this electricity could be used to power light bulbs and larger devices, including medical equipment and food or vaccine refrigerators. ThermoSilk system promises to make emergency structures safer and to provide a higher quality of life to inhabitants while supplying access to reliable electricity. To synthetically engineer the silk, we begin by identifying key genes used to make the protein. Many of the genes used to make hornet silk proteins have already been identified in previous studies. These genes will be coded into a ring of DNA called an inducible plasmid. This plasmid will then be transformed through the cellular membrane into E. coli. We deemed E. coli to be the best vector to use in the research and development process due to its ease of use and versatility. Once the plasmid is transformed into E. coli and the bacteria are screened, the plasmids will be induced to start protein production. The proteins that are produced in the bacteria will then be extracted and spun to generate a thread. This thread will be woven into fabric using methods common in the textile industry. The resulting fabric will be fitted with electrodes at key points to enable us to tap into its electrical potential. We were lucky enough to consult with leaders in the recombinant silk world on our methods of production, especially bolt threads and their spider silk production techniques. Our research suggests that transitioning from E. coli to yeast will allow us to scale up our production and greatly reduce the cost of our product. Once this transition has been made, the process of the production of silk proteins will be very similar to that of beer mated with conventional textile fabrication, presumably with similar costs.
Researchers have been successful in manipulating the genetic sequence used in order to change the molecular structure of their silk to develop features that are not present in nature. We believe that we can also use this process to improve the thermoregulatory or thermoelectric properties of the silk. We will distribute our thermoelectrical linings in conjunction with our own polypropylene and steel shelter structures so that the lining and shelter integrate together perfectly. Drawing further inspiration from the hornet's nest, these structures are hexagonal in order to enable higher efficiency, horizontal stacking, and modularity.
Our structure will include an integrated electrical system encompassing wiring and lights. It will be built to easily plug in batteries, solar panels, or other components. In the future, the ThermoSilk project can lead in many exciting directions. Although the ideal system is our current design, we also want to make sure that this technology can reach any who need it. To this end, we would like to expand production to linings compatible with many major emergency shelters already in production. Down the line, we would also like to integrate bathroom facilities and water collection systems into the shelter design. On a global scale, we eventually anticipate these shelters to be compatible with different types of climates and lifestyles. At ThermoSilk, we have designed a novel and biodegradable emergency shelter lining that produces electricity while protecting its inhabitants from dangerous heat. We've done it because we believe technology should reflect the changing global landscape and that the best way to evolve is to follow nature. If we have anything to say about it, the emergency shelter and bioenergy sectors will look very different in coming years.